Logic is a science of reasoning. Logic is a science of reasoning. There is a specific way to think. There's a specific way to break ideas down, to organize thoughts, and to find a way to put them together in a way that is compelling. So that's a science, and it's known as logic. The originator of this science is Aristotle, who comes about 3 centuries before Christ. Okay, so Aristotle is known as the founding father of the principles of logic. Now, logic and logical thought existed before him, clearly, because the pyramids that were built way before he was even born were clearly built based on logical premises. So people were intelligent and logical way before he came about. But the reason why he is at the forefront of when we talk of logic and the science and history of logic, he's the first man in written history to have written the code of logic, a system of how to think. Aristotle is the first person that we know of in the history of mankind to have written it down as a form of science. In the same way, Imam al-Shafi'i was the first to write down the rules of how to derive legal rulings from the various sources. He was the first to write down those rules and codify them. However, he's not the first scholar to have done so. He's just the first to have written it down in a systematic way. Likewise, Ibn Khaldun is the first Muslim scholar to write down the rules of history in a book, to codify it, to give it structure, which is why we call him the father of historiography and sociology. Not that it did not exist before him, but he wrote it down in a way that is systematic. So Aristotle is the first human being that we know of, Muslim and non-Muslim, who wrote it down, systemized and structured it. So he's the father of logic. Okay? So he effectively invented, quote-unquote, logic. The book that eventually came about from his various essays and treatises is known collectively as the organon. The organon, okay? This is the tool. So in Greek, it was known as the organon. By translation, it means the tool, because it's giving you the tools with which to think logically, okay? The way he presents it is that this science, logic, is not like the other subjects. So for example, physics is studied only for physics, for the purpose of physics. Mathematics only studied for mathematics, so on and so forth. Each subject has its own place and is studied for that subject alone. Logic, however, is studied for all subjects. It's a subject that applies to everything in life. So when you study logic, it's not just for logic. You're studying logic for every single topic that you can ever come across. So it's the foundation, really, for intelligent conversation, engagement, and science. It's the foundation layer. It's for everything. Okay, it permeates everything. Logic was, of course, taught in ancient classical times, and up until modern times, for anyone involved in serious education. Okay, so you had to study logic. You needed to study logic. It was a necessity. In recent times, in modern times, postmodern times, logic is not taught in school anymore. There is no topic at school called logic. We have physics, we have mathematics, we have geography, we have languages. We don't have logic. Why do you think, given the fact that he says to us very clearly, logic permeates everything, it's a foundation for everything, we have a schooling system globally that does not teach logic? Why do you think that could be the reason? What could be driving that decision by governments and states to not teach logic but everything else?
Maybe they just don't want people to think. Just what they've been told is that's what you need to think.
Precisely. The education system is not for creating thinkers. Rockefeller said it very clearly. We're not creating a nation of thinkers. We want a nation of workers. You are not being educated to think. You're being educated, you're being instructed to learn certain topics that will be useful for the economy. So you can pay taxes for the government to be able to draw revenues. You are not in education, unless you're in liberal arts education or maybe advanced education. The mainstream education system is not about creating thinkers. It's about creating conformative citizens for tomorrow. Just take what we tell you as facts. Don't question it. Don't apply logic to it. Just take it as facts. You'll have a nice life. Okay. So those who want higher education, they must study logic. They must study logic, okay, to be able to analyze, compare, validate, invalidate arguments and theories presented to them. Okay? So in classical times, it was absolutely essential you study logic. If we go back to the initial triangle, you studied grammar, how to speak properly, how to identify the meaning of words and structures and sentences. Rhetoric, how to convey that information properly in a compelling way. And logic, how to think properly. If you don't know how to think properly, others will think on your behalf. If you can't use logic for your own benefits, somebody else will use their logic to think on your behalf. Okay? We don't want to be those people. We want to be people who think. Yeah? We don't fall under this ayah. الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. We don't want to be under this category of people who don't think. Yeah? We want to be people who think deeply and profoundly. So he invents this system known as the organon. The book is a collection of books actually, but the system is known as logic. Okay, Ibn Khaldun mentions this in his Muqaddimah. Of course he would, because he compares his Muqaddimah to the organon of Aristotle. So when he begins to explain the Muqaddimah, what the Muqaddimah is about, what it's going to teach, he says it should be known that this discussion of this topic, the Muqaddimah, is something new. Historiography from the Muslims is something new and extraordinary and highly useful. I'm about to introduce to you the Muqaddimah, which has no precedent. It's a new science altogether. It's very extraordinary, it's very powerful, it's very useful. Penetrating research has shown the way to it. In other words, I have had to do original research to get to this point. I'm not regurgitating old ideas. I've made original efforts to get to this product of the Muqaddimah. It does not belong to rhetoric, one of the logical disciplines. So this is not part of rhetoric. It's not just talking for the sake of talking, in which he explains or he identifies Aristotle's organon. Yeah.
He also criticizes a lot of events from
Yes.
past historians, like the Israelites, the number of soldiers. Like he uses a lot of logic to debunk a lot of the stories and legends passed down.
Absolutely. So he's saying to you, this book here is not just going to be another storytelling book. It's going to engage you critically. Right? So when he talks of the logic, he mentions Aristotle's organon. So this book was certainly known by Ibn Khaldun and his likes. It was a book that the Arabs and the Persians and the Muslim scholars of old studied. In fact, they translated it into Arabic. If we have a copy of this in the modern world today, in English or French, because the Arabs or the Muslim scholars in Baghdad translated it into Arabic. And from Arabic, we get it into Latin and other languages. So it's nothing new to us in the Muslim world. Nothing new to us. Okay. The organon itself is a compilation of 6 different treatises. Aristotle has 6 different treatises, which he combines under one title, the organon. Later on is inherited that way. This is broken down into 6 different discussions. Categories, interpretation, prior analytics, and then posterior analytics. This is one copy of that. Topics, sophistical refutations. So somebody studying logic from the Aristotle's organon will study 6 books in total. We are not going to go down that route. This is something that takes years, right? Professional training. I'm not going to get into that today, but I want you to understand that the book, the organon, is comprised of 6 different books. Categories, interpretation, prior analytics, posterior analytics, topics, sophistical refutations. So scholars of old would study this book as a primer for advanced studies later on. They would have to understand the functions of the organon. Each book would be taught and studied and understood before they move on to the next book. Once you complete the entire collection, you are ready to start discussing philosophical ideas about truth, arguments and debates. This is how proper arguments are done and debates are done, with structure and with classical studies. Okay, This was when debates were actually interesting. So within these books, he talks of, for example, propositions. I'm going to talk about these. So the top 6, the books I will not talk about, is too expansive. But I will fish out the most important elements and explain them to you in simple terms, okay? Propositions, syllogisms, induction, deduction, scientific knowledge, fallacies, and debating styles, okay? And there is a lot more to it, but I'll explain to you the key elements here, that even if you haven't studied the organon, you could still benefit from the very basic principles outlined here, okay? It is very fascinating because what essentially it does, it prepares the students or the reader to be a more disciplined and principled speaker. When you engage with anybody else on a logical topic, you know how to maneuver. It's like a chessboard. Discussions, logical discussions and exchange is a chessboard. Each person plays their hand and you wait for the other person to move their hand and you maneuver based on what they've done. So based on what you have just said to me, I will respond in a way that will counter your logic until in the end we see whose logic is stronger. That's how discussions are had when people understand the rules of logic. We don't get diverted by emotions or ad hominem attacks, insults, or petty names. No, you engage me in a discussion. I'm going to match you in that discussion, logically speaking. Let's go toe to toe. And let's see who can, at the end of it, produce a more logical conclusion. And when you have those sorts of engagements, even if you lose, it's a pleasurable encounter. Because it's almost like playing with a master chess player. And when they beat you, if you recognize chess and the rules of chess, you admire their expertise. Wow, that was a good move. That was really clever what you just did there. I can learn from that. Anytime you debate with someone or you discuss with someone and you begin with a position that is weak, it's a weak position, and that person through logic and debate manages to defeat you logically and with his rhetoric, you are the winner. You are the real winner. Why? Because you began with 0. And by the end of the discussion, you went to 1 increment. You gained 1. You gained knowledge and insight. That person who defeated you in the debate hasn't lost and hasn't won anything. They were right to begin with, and they remain right afterwards. So there is no incremental improvement. So with that mindset, when you discuss with people, you should be open to learning. Because if you prove me wrong logically, I'm the winner. I'm the one who learned something. Right? Rather than being hurt by being defeated. No. I won something here. Now I'm a level higher than I was before the discussion happens. Which is why it's always it's a pleasure to discuss with people who understand how to have logical discussions. You always win. You always win. It's a nightmare to discuss with people who don't understand logic, who don't know the rules of logic, and who only want to win. This is why Sayyidina Ali says, I can debate 100 scholars and I would win 100 times. But if I debate one fool, I will lose 100 times. I can debate 100 scholars, educated people who understand the principles of knowledge, and I will win 100 times. But if I debate one fool, I will lose 100 times. Because the goalpost keeps changing. They don't respect the principles of knowledge or logic. I'm sure we've all had the experience. Discussing with people something, you can't pin them down to one topic. They move on to the next one. Right? And if that doesn't work, insults and name calling. So you don't get anything out of that discussion. It's not a logical discussion. But in a logical discussion, you learn things. And also, if you can prove that your logic is superior, all the best. Right? It's a pleasurable experience, really. But in order to get to that level, we must understand what logic is. What are the rules of logic? Okay, I find it very pleasurable because I'm typically logically minded anyway. So I really ask people, please, if you have a different opinion that I have, don't back down. Come to me with everything you have. Let's go toe to toe and see where we end up. Because I want to learn as well. If I'm wrong logically, teach me. Right? But I want to see how strong your logical argument is. Okay? I think it's a good place to be. So you're not debating for the sake of ego, but genuinely to learn and to teach. Okay? So these categories, these 6 books, the first book itself is also subdivided. So we have the organon at the top, which has 6, you could say, it's an anthology with 6 different volumes. The first volume, categories, is further broken down into 10 categories. So these 10 categories, the scholars of Islam also study them. You know, you hear sometimes online, where is Allah? Is Allah time-bound? The directions, all these discussions, okay? These are categories in logical sequence. These are categories, okay? Aristotle breaks it down into 10 categories. The first category is substance. Substance. What the thing is. What the thing is, that, for example, the substance, the essence of something, that's the first category. So the reason why he breaks it down this way is because he says before you discuss anything, before you debate, before you inquire, you have to qualify the thing you're talking about. You need to first have a good picture of what you're talking about. And there are 10 dimensions by which you can do that. The first dimension is substance. What the scholars of Aqidah would say, that or the essence of something. So for example, this is a tree. The somethingness of it is a tree. So you identify a tree. So tree is the substance of this subject we're talking about. Tree. It's not a chair. It's not a wooden table. It's a tree. So let's agree on that first and foremost. The second criteria is quantity. How many of them are there? Is it one tree? Is it 2 trees? Or is it a forest? Let's agree on that as well, the quantity of things. So, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. The quantity there is classified very clearly. Quantity is 1. Then the quality. So this way you describe the thing. Is the tree a short tree? Is it a tall tree? Is it a brown tree? Is it a red tree? The quality of something, the quality it has to be clarified. In the modern age, we have difficulties with this because now we don't even know, first of all, the substance of something. Is it a man or a woman? We've lost that logical foundation now because it's fluid, isn't it? You can be a man and a woman, okay? It's no longer clear. And the quality of it, what makes a man and a woman, we've also lost that. So we're not living in an age of logic. We're living in an age of fantasy. According to Aristotle's primary criteria, categories, we have to qualify what a man is distinctively. And the qualities and the essence of a man will be very clear before you debate the issue of gender. Before you debate the issue of gender, you would have to have a very, very clear outline as to what a man is, what a woman is. Now we can discuss and debate. Okay? But when you look at these discussions, you don't even get that far. It's all about emotions, what I feel, identified with. Nothing is concrete because it's an illogical discussion. It's a waste of time. So the fourth criteria is relation. And this is where you would say, for example, this tree that has 100 branches and has green leaves is taller than that tree or shorter than this. So the relation, the proportionality to something different to it, something else. That's also very important. Yeah. So when we say La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, we are identifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His qualities, and we're differentiating Him from others. There's no comparative to Him. Allahu Akbar. Allah is the greatest. So now we have the relationship here is He's the greatest. He's not equal to anything else. Yeah, so we make that very clear and direct from the beginning. So the relation of something to something else is also clarified. Then the time. So for example, this tree is 100 years old. This tree has been around for 50 years. You give a time limit or a timing, okay? Within a time spectrum, you place it somewhere in time. When you do that, you also have to place it in space. So where is the tree planted? In my back garden. Okay? Or it's planted in a garden, or maybe in the park. You locate it, you give it a timing, you give it qualities. So as you begin to even prepare for a debate, you begin to fill in all of these different blanks in your brain. You fill all blanks in your brain, okay? Before you begin to use logic and apply logic to it. Very scientific, fascinating stuff. I wish we could all operate at that level. If you look at, for example, some of the books of the scholars of Islam, when it comes to fiqh and aqidah, you'll find them giving terms. For example, this means this, it does not mean this. Right? So they will qualify something, but at the same time they'll disqualify something else from it. They are using Aristotle's logical pretext and formats. This means this, it does not mean this, as opposed to this, which means this, that could mean this, but doesn't mean this. All of this is logic, and they're putting it down not for people like you and me, for other logical thinkers, scholars like them, to understand the language of logic. Before he gets into the conclusion, he's going to put everything out there, make it very clear, very precise, and then get into the logic. Okay, this is why books such as the books of Ibn Taymiyyah, the books of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Ibn Hazm, is not for ordinary people. If you don't have the grounding in the basics of these things, you're going to read those books and be confused or confuse others. There is a way to read these books. Okay, it's not just for anyone to pick up a book in English today. I've read Ibn Taymiyyah, he says this. Okay, did you understand the principles he was working with? Do you know how to break down his ideas? Do you know why he said this and not that? You confuse other people, you confuse yourself. Right? So logic is a foundation that we all have to at least appreciate and understand. Then position. Is this thing standing or lying or sitting? Is it sideways? Is it forward leaning? The position also is identified. Then the possession. So what does this thing have? So this tree has leaves. This tree has fruit. It possesses something. What is this possession? Trees, leaves, branches and fruit. The possession. And then the action. So the action is, what is this thing doing? At the moment, this tree is giving shade to people who are sitting beneath it. What is it doing? The action is doing. It's giving shade. Right? Finally, the effects. So the subject and object. So for example, the tree can be affected, and it can effect something as well. So the tree can be cut down. Someone else is acting in a way that affects the tree. The tree is being chopped down, but the tree itself is affecting something else. The tree fell down onto a house and broke it. So you distinguish and you identify what is happening to the subject and what the subject is doing something else. Okay? It's it's very elaborate. It's very elaborate. It's very precise. It's very measured. It's very definite. So before you even begin anywhere else with logic, you need to understand how to clarify things, classify things, identify and define things. Once you've gotten to that stage, you can move on to the next stage. Okay, so I'm going to take a few examples here. Is anybody confused? Because I know it's very archaic, sometimes terminology. Anyone confused? Or are we okay for the time being? Probably I can't.
Just two questions. I'm not sure if on the previous slide, were you going to cover the 6, 7 elements at the bottom? I'm not sure if you were.
We will, yeah. We will.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. And my question is, in regards to this, I think you might have touched upon it. So how do you try to talk to somebody that totally negates potential what you're trying to say? For example, nowadays issue is, what is a man, what is a woman? So if you say to somebody, well, a man is a man, like something that's just understood, but how do you try to bring that out? Because it is sometimes abstract. Or for example, when you say, well, that was done out of respect. For example, in Berlin or Medina, wherever, sometimes they haven't built buildings over a certain height due to respect out of a church or, for example, the Prophet's mosque. But the other person won't even accept that as even a reality, because they'll be like, well, what's respect? And in our case, like, what is a man, what is a woman? So the goalpost, you can't put the goalpost down because the other person just totally doesn't want to even acknowledge that. How do you deal with somebody like that? Because even in day-to-day life, when you try to talk to somebody about something, they just totally seem to, they talk as if they don't understand what you're saying.
This relativism, this relativist ideology. This is why Nietzsche says in his book, God is dead. And if you continue reading, we have killed him. And if you continue reading, this is a disaster. If we don't have moral, if we don't have objective standards, and God is the objective, God is the ultimate al-haq, huwa al-haq. He's the ultimate objective standard. I don't want to get into too much of the aqidah side of things, but Allah, in all religions, is the ultimate. Ana al-haq, I am the truth. What does it mean? I am the ultimate standard for reality, for truth. I'm the ultimate measure. If you remove God, you have nothing but confusion. Yeah? That's why when Nietzsche said God is dead, what he meant was, we have purposefully removed God, the ultimate bar. Once we did that, there's nothing is true and nothing is false anymore. Anything goes. فَاصْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ, do as you like. Yeah? And that's what, what's his name again? Aleister Crowley says, and the law shall be, do as thou wilt. Yeah? When Shaitan came to Adam and Hawa, what did he tell them? Eat the tree so you can do what? You'll be immortal, invincible, and you'll have unlimited knowledge. In other words, do as you like. It's a trick. So when you engage with someone on any topic, you want to engage with them logically, they have to agree on the basics, the substance. Do you agree men exist? Yes or no? Okay, men do exist. Okay, fine. How do you recognize a man when you see him? Because I need to know the substance we're working with here. Well, a man has this genitalia, a man typically has this, has this. Can we agree on that? Yes. Let's move on to the next discussion, the qualities of a man. What are his qualities? So on and so forth. Once they agree to that, you agree, they agree, lock the door. Okay, now we've got everything agreed. Let's lock the door. Let's begin discussing logically.
And yeah, no, totally. And I've tried that. And let's just say even with siblings, normally I notice that second question, for example, when you try to tie them down, that's when you'll get like a long-winded answer. You won't guess.
They're at that point, brother, don't waste your time. Because what they're doing is leaving the door open. That's why I said lock the door. Once you and I have discussed, we agree we're going to discuss something. You and I have agreed, these are the terms, the definitions. You have agreed, I have agreed. A man is a human being, has two eyes, he has a certain genitalia. His qualities are, he's typically has a deeper voice, he's a boy, he grows. We agree on all of that, fine. Please lock the door. Because you're not allowed to leave the room when you feel like it now. Yeah? I'm talking theoretically here. Lock the door so we can discuss on what we've agreed upon. That's why Allah says in the Quran, تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم. Christians and Jews, come. Tell them, Muhammad, to come upon what? What you feel like religion is? No. Come upon a word that is common for both of us. Come upon a word, a definition, an understanding that is common for all of us. Because if you don't have that commonality, you can just make up whatever you like, whenever you feel like it. And it's a never-ending cycle of whataboutism. It's a waste of time. If they cannot give you a definitive definition of what they believe a man is to begin with, walk away. Because what they're going to do is waste your time. If you get them on one point, they move to the next point, then they change that point. That's not a logical argument. It's actually just a whimsical argument. I said so, so it's right. Okay? So those people, make sure from the very beginning you clarify. And typically, if somebody is not prepared for logical argument, in the first two questions you can disqualify them straight away. Right, so this is where you qualify something before you move on to something else. And then you lock the door behind. Yeah? It's actually quite satisfying, and I've been using these terms, very satisfying to be able to discuss with someone something, get them to define something, and then when you lock the door, you go toe-to-toe. If there are somebody who thinks logically, has a logical argument, it's brilliant. Go back and forth. Brilliant. If they are not logical, and they just put things out there, very quickly you'll find them making excuses. Oh, actually, I didn't mean it that way. What I meant was this. Right? Or, okay, I said always, but what I meant is sometimes. Okay? So you can now reduce that argument to a specific point which you can both agree upon, and then you bring the logic. Okay? That's how you discuss and debate. This is why, if you observe next time the old debates between, for example, Sheikh Ahmed Didat, rahimahullah, and his opponents, when the opponent is talking, what is Ahmed Didat doing? What is he busy doing? If you watch the old videos, he's busy writing things down. He's writing, yeah. What he's doing there is he's taking logical points. Okay, he said this means this. Okay, how do I counter that? So when he goes up to speak, he can, based on logical premises in these categories here, he can counter what they've said and pin them down. Likewise, when he's speaking, they're in the corner doing what? Taking notes. This is how discussions with logic take place. You have to listen to the other person. Let them talk, because the more they talk, the more they give away, and the more logical ammunition you have to counter their arguments. That's how it works, okay? I miss those debates because those were really, I could learn from there, the different styles of logic, fascinating stuff. Today it's just a screaming contest and name calling. Yeah. So those are the 10 categories. Now, Aristotle was and is one of the most influential thinkers in the history of mankind. One of the most influential thinkers in the history of mankind is Aristotle. When he was alive, he was a teacher to Alexander the Great. So Philip, Alexander's father, employed Aristotle to instruct Alexander. So his personal teacher was Aristotle. And we know from the students what he went on to achieve in the world, right?
Was he pagan?
Yes, he was pagan. He was pagan, yeah. Not only pagan, Socrates, so Aristotle, was a student of, can anyone give me his teacher's name? Plato. Whose teacher was? Socrates. According to Ibn Khaldun, his teacher was? You go to Zeno, and then you go to, there's a prophet in the Quran. So, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Zeno, there's someone above that who's in the Quran, according to Ibn Khaldun. Does anyone know? Luqman. Yeah, Luqman. According to classical Muslims, Luqman was the originator of some of these philosophies and these ideas. He taught Zeno. Zeno taught his students, comes down to Socrates, who teaches Plato, who teaches Aristotle. And then later on, Aristotle...
They said Luqman was of African descent.
He was Sudanese, yes. Sudanese.
So if this is in Greece, or the Greek, how...
Yes.
Was
Good questions. Let's go back a bit. Good, wonderful question. Firstly, Socrates and Plato make it very clear they studied from the Egyptians. They made that very clear. There's nothing hidden. They took sciences from the Egyptians. At the time, Egypt was Kemet, okay? So they took from there. They made it very clear. There's nothing hidden about that. Their knowledge was inherited from Egypt. Now, Luqman, alayhi salam, he worked in the court of Sayyidina Sulaiman. So when Sulaiman was alive, he was a king. The kingdom of Judea, which is current day Palestine, was the kingdom that he ruled over. In his kingdom, Luqman was hired as a judge in the kingdom of Sulaiman. So he hires Luqman to work in his court. So he's already now in the Middle East. He's in the Middle East. Okay? But that region, Palestine, of the kingdom of Judea, is next to Egypt. Yeah? So all of these knowledges are inherited. Ibn Khaldun mentions in the Muqaddimah, all of these civilizations inherit from one another. They all inherit from one another. They benefit one another and inherit from one another. It's a human tree of knowledge, and we all benefit one another.
And Ustad, is that why it's quite injustice that the West don't acknowledge the Islamic civilization, even though they took from... Because in our education, never do we really discuss Islamic civilization.
They hide it. They give it different names. Al-Farabi, Al-Faravius. Ibn Sina, Avicenna. Al-Ghazali, Al-Ghazal. They Latinize the names to appropriate those people and to hide the Arabic sources. Whereas in Islam and the Muslims, we never hid Aristotle. We know he was a Greek Yunani. We never hide the real identity of people. It's always made known. He was a pagan, 100%. No question. In fact, at the time, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they believed in pederasty, which is that a mentor, and his mentee, his apprentice, could have relations. And it was perfectly acceptable. In fact, Socrates would boast about it in his classes, in his book. He never wrote a book Plato wrote a book on his behalf. He would boast about it. In his classes, the young men who came to study, including Plato, would flirt with him, Socrates. Homosexuality was widely acceptable in ancient Greece. In fact, it was favorable to heterosexual relationships. They had wives, but only for the purpose of procreation, nothing else. It was only by necessity they had wives. But the real relationship was man to man. Man to boy specifically. Pederasty. Pedagogic pederasty.
You're right. And he had this crazy logic where for a man to really have pleasure, he has to meet these certain things and only another man can.
Yes. And also, they believe that intelligence transmits through the semen. So part of educating somebody is you can fill the gap, right?
Yeah, and the views of women in that time were quite
Disgusting. Disgusting, yeah. She wasn't a human being. She had no soul. And you only could marry one. I'm going to interject something here. They hated women so much. And this is why Pauline Christianity inherits from that philosophy. Monogamy is not a sign of loving women and honoring women. It's the opposite. They consider women so impure, so unworthy. They're only good for one thing, giving children. So if you have to marry, just do one, because anything more than that is absolutely unessential. Just one. Monogamy wasn't a sign of we respect women. It's because of, no. It came from these homosexual civilizations who believed true love could only be, there is a book, famous book actually, it's The Symposia. If you think I'm telling you things exaggerating, Google it. Socrates sits around a gathering of other thinkers in ancient Greece, and they begin to discuss theoretically the wonders of the world, knowledge, science. Said Plato, if you could pick your profession other than a teacher, what would you choose to be? What's your dream job, Plato? Socrates. Socrates says, my dream job is a procurer. Procurement, a procurer. A procurer is a pimp. That's where the word procurement comes from. You procure something, you're a pimp. These ideas don't think, they just melted away. The Romans inherited them. The Roman Empire, the soldiers also believed they would practice sodomy openly. They believed that for man to be strong, and strength comes from semen as well. These are things that they believed. Nevertheless, we inherit the knowledge and leave the rest. Our scholars never thought of this because they were pagan homosexuals who don't take anything. No, we take what's good and we leave the rest. Yeah, we take what's good, we leave the rest. Allah will judge them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird. I was just going to say, even in the movie Alexander the Great, I think they quite clearly showcase sort of men sleeping with.
Yeah, he had a boyfriend. Yeah, he had a lover. Yeah. This is very clear. This is why those who say that Alexander was 𝗔𝗥𝗓𝗏, they have a hard time justifying that. He was a pagan. When he went to Egypt, he took upon himself to be the son of Amun-Ra. So he was a demigod accordingly. He had a boyfriend. He had a girlfriend. He had a wife as well, Roxana, or Roxanne, Persian princess. But he also had, because that was standard. You have male lovers for true love. Because as you mentioned, only a man understands a man. You have a woman just for breeding. And she's only at home. She stays at home. That's it. And in some cases, when you die, she's either inherited, somebody inherits her like property. We can be here all day. Paul of Tarsus took those ideas and Christianized them. And today the Roman Christian world tells us these are the standards of the norms of man-female relationships. It's to honor the woman. No, it's not to honor the woman. It's because you considered it inferior to be the woman out of necessity. What was actually favored was man to man. Yeah, we can be here all day.
It's you said they were very great thinkers of that time, and they applied logic, but then they were pagan, so did they never question their own beliefs?
They had their own beliefs. Allah says in the Quran, we make fair seeming to them their actions. Is that in the Quran? We make fair seeming to them their actions. Look today, who is the most powerful nation on earth, technologically speaking? Okay, look at how they behave. LGBT, look at how they behave socially, what they believe. You could say in 1,000 years from now, or 100 years from now, how could they be the most advanced and powerful nation and they still believed in man and woman, not the same, a man can be a woman? You can't, it doesn't fit in necessarily logically. You can be very intelligent and lose common sense at the same time. That's possible. Yeah. It doesn't, I mean, look, the argument, a man, what's a man? Who produced that documentary? An American. And today we have this misgendering, right? You can see a man is a man. And if he says, I feel like a woman, you call him a man, you are the one who made the mistake. You misgendered him. Despite all the science we have, all the technology we have, that is still a norm in the society. So just being intelligent doesn't mean you have common sense. They were very intelligent, but society had its way of them, and they believed these things. Semen carries, for example, intelligence. They believed it. Aristotle, the difference between him and his teachers is one thing. He did not believe in raping children. I mean, this is hard-hitting information, but it's out there. He did not believe that the mentor was able to force himself on the child. He has to be willing, consensual. That's where he differentiates between him, Plato, and Socrates, and the others who believed that the mentor had the right to the body of the apprentice. That's his payment. Aristotle says, no. It's okay they have a relationship, but just he can't force himself. That's where the difference is, the ikhtilaf. Okay, so enough of ancient Greek knowledge. Luqman al-Hakim accordingly was at the top of that. Well, it is. This is the world we live in, right? But it does demonstrate that our predecessors were able to know all of that and still derive only the beneficial knowledge for what they needed it for. They did not say, this is kafir knowledge, we're going to just throw everything in the bin. They took what was necessary. They corrected a lot as well, by the way, in the translation. They corrected a lot. And they advanced that way. So we take what's good, we leave the rest. Because knowledge is a human thing. It's not just for the Muslims. Al-hikmatu 𝗔𝗥𝗜𝗦𝗧𝗥𝗍𝗓 lil-mu'mineen. Is your riding beast. Wherever you find it, take it. Okay?
It might sound ignorant what I'm saying, but you know, obviously when Islam spread, they took Plato, Aristotle. Would it be better for us as Muslims to learn about Aristotle and Plato through their Islamic adaptation, understanding of?
We have that already. That's been done. No, that's been done. That's been done already. So the translators at the time, as they're translating Aristotle, they were making corrections to his errors. So for example, we have Ibn Sina as-Shifa. So they give us, this is Aristotle, but we are Muslims. So we're not going to give you Aristotle unfiltered. We're going to correct the errors, give further clarification, and also combine Islamic thinking to what he was saying. Al-Farabi also. So they take these ideas and they Islamify them. So for example, Plato has a republic, right? It's very famous. Al-Farabi writes a book known as Al-Madinatul Fadila, the virtuous city. The difference is he takes on what Islam wants from society and the individual, and he superimposes it with what Plato wrote about the republic. So we have more than enough books from the Muslim scholars. We have the same thing with Al-Ghazali. The first chapter, the first book was explaining the principles of philosophy, and the second one exposing the errors of philosophy. So there's Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Hazm. We have more than enough. We don't have to go to Plato. We have more than enough. We have more than enough. Yeah. And by the way, I won't get into it. It's too profound. It's too much. I mean, I wish we could spend more time on this. The ideas are mind-blowing, honestly. At that level of thinking, you would look at Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Hazm, Ibn Sina from a very different perspective. You're thinking matrix level thinking, honestly. Crazy ideas. I mean, crazy in a good way. In a good way. Fascinating stuff, honestly. It's just profound thinking. But it's all speculation at the end of the day, because, yeah. وَمَنْ يُؤْتَ الْحِكْمَةَ فَقَدْ أُوتِيَ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. Profound stuff. When we hear Plato, Aristotle, especially Aristotle, who the Muslims called, the nickname is what? I'm testing your philosophy and general knowledge of Greek history here. What did the Muslims call him as a title? Aristotle. What was his title? No. Al-Mu'allim al-Awwal. The first teacher. So the question should be, wait a second. You're a Muslim. You call him the first teacher. What question should follow that? No. Where do you put Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam then? Straight away. That's the level to which they put Aristotle. Al-Mu'allim al-Awwal. The first teacher. So before you begin the other sciences, you go to the first teacher. He was a pagan homosexual. So we learn a lot about the epistemology of the Muslims in the early generations, the resilience, the also curiosity. They didn't have to translate and look into this, but they were curious people. They looked into these things. Then they looked at what was good and took it out. Of course, there was some excess. We have, for example, the Mu'tazila, they come from that movement. So there is excess, but ultimately speaking, our system of education has incorporated mantiq ever since. At least the good madaris and the good schools, they've had to have Aristotle's logic as a foundation principle. Yeah, there is a lot. So you can see here, classical Islamic depiction of Aristotle teaching astronomy. This is how they depicted him, teaching astronomy. Then we have books. There are books written. So if you want to learn a lot more about what I've just said now, there are books written. It is fascinating stuff. It really is fascinating stuff. I would say the Muslim world had inherited or are the inheritors of Aristotle's ancient knowledge and wisdom. Because through Arabic and Persian, French, Latin and Greek were able to inherit it. Or Latin actually, it was translated in, they took it from the Arabic. So the Muslims actually brought about, they revived and preserved his legacy. We were the connecting link between that ancient thinking and the modern thinking. Yeah. All right, so we have many scholars, okay, who were fond admirers and students of Aristotle. We have Ibn Sina, very famous, Al-Farabi. Al-Farabi is known as Al-Muallim Al-Thani, the second teacher, because Al-Farabi was exceptionally well gifted in translating, explaining, breaking down Aristotle. So once you get to Aristotle, you can't understand, go to Al-Farabi, the second teacher. So within the Muslim tradition, Al-Farabi is that guy that you go to if you want to understand Aristotle and his logic and his principles. Al-Farabi. Al-Ghazali, who then writes his book, his two books, one explaining the principles of philosophy and the other one breaking it, and then Ibn Rushd. And there are many others, Ibn Khaldun himself. Yeah. So here in the Muqaddimah you can read their school tradition, so he's talking about the Stoics, is assumed to have passed from Luqman. So this is where he originates that knowledge, from Luqman alayhi salam. And his teacher, his students who teach Socrates. And Socrates teaches Plato, Aristotle, Alexander, and then so on and so on and so on. It's a wonderful connection of civilizations. It's wonderful. I find it amazing that our predecessors did not divide knowledge between Islamic knowledge or Muslim knowledge and Kuffar knowledge, the way we do it today. They see it as a seamless line of human connections between ancient to modern. We inherit and we refine and we pass on. That's how you think about knowledge. Knowledge is not just for the Muslim or the non-Muslim. We can benefit from it. How we derive it and what we do with it, that's different. That is now Islamic. What we do with the knowledge is Islamic. What they do with it is what they do with it. But knowledge itself is for everyone. Okay, so he has this wonderful lineage of these sciences from Luqman alayhi salam. All right, so he's known as the first teacher, Al-Muallim Al-Awwal. Aristotle is known as the first teacher. And you can see again the Muqaddimah. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander, the rule of the Greeks, or to be more precise, what was Yugoslavia at the time. And then he goes on to defeat the Persians. So the greatest scientist and the greatest prestige and fame, Aristotle, we know, was the greatest of the thinkers. And he was called the first teacher. He was called this by the Muslims. He was called this by the Muslims. Okay. So that's an introduction, and they call him in Arabic Aristo. Aristo. That's how they call him, Aristo. Okay. So that's the introduction to his logic, his works. We'll take a break, inshallah. When we come back, I'm going to give you the basics of logic, inshallah, the categories of logic, and then we're going to get into that, inshallah. Yeah. So let's take a break, and we'll be back after Salah.
Welcome to HistoryUn, the world's leading online learning platform specializing in Islamic history. To discover the HistoryUn mobile app and participate in regular live and interactive seminars and tune in directly from your handset. from anywhere in the world. Enjoy instant access to a growing catalog of on-demand streaming content exclusive to the platform, accessible from a variety of devices including desktops, tablets, and cell phones. Connect instantly with our global community of history enthusiasts via our private community forum. To find out more about our online history programs and resources, visit our website today at www.historyune.com.